It was a quiet morning in the small town. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over the streets, and the hum of the town waking up filled the air. People were starting their day, some heading to work, others stopping at local shops, but for the most part, it was like any other morning. At the far end of town, near the old building district, lived a man most people rarely noticed. He didn't have a home in the traditional sense. For years he had lived on the streets, moving from place to place, doing his best to survive. Most of the town had forgotten about him, or maybe never really paid attention to him in the first place. He had fallen through the cracks of society, but that didn't stop him from carrying on each day, doing what he could. His name wasn't important to most, and it didn't matter to him either. People just called him the homeless man, but he was more than that, even if no one had ever taken the time to learn his story. He was a tall man, with a weathered face and kind eyes. Despite everything life had thrown at him, there was a gentleness about him. He still helped those who crossed his path, even if he had little to offer. Whether it was helping someone with a heavy bag, or offering a word of encouragement to a stranger, he was always there when needed. That morning he sat on a bench in front of a small cafe, watching the world go by, waiting for his next move. He had learned over the years that sometimes it was better to simply sit and observe life unfolding. There was no rush, no need to hurry. Life had a way of coming to you even if you were living on the edge of it all. Across town, a woman had just arrived. She was new to the area, having recently moved into a large house on the outskirts of town. People had noticed her when she first arrived, but she kept to herself. She wasn't one to mingle much, her mind always on business. She had everything she needed: money, a successful career, a life built on years of hard work and ambition. But despite all her success, she felt a bit lost. She had moved here for a change of pace, to escape the hustle and bustle of the city and start fresh. But so far it felt like nothing had changed. She was still surrounded by walls, walls that protected her, walls that kept people at a distance. This woman, despite her wealth and position, hadn't really connected with anyone in town. Most of the townspeople saw her as someone from a different world. She was a mystery to them, and she liked it that way. She didn't feel the need to explain herself. After all, she had worked hard for everything she had, and what did it matter if people didn't understand her? She didn't expect them to. On this particular morning, she decided to take a walk, something she hadn't done in a while. The air felt fresh, and she hoped it would clear her mind. She walked down the main street, past the shops and cafes, admiring the quiet beauty of the town. She walked with purpose, but her thoughts were elsewhere. It wasn't long before she found herself near the old building district, a part of town that she had never really explored before. The buildings here were worn and tired, some of them abandoned, others in the process of being torn down or renovated. It wasn't the most beautiful part of town, but there was something about it that drew her in. Perhaps it was the quiet, or the fact that it was so different from the polished, perfect world she had created for herself. It was as if she could almost feel the history in the air, the lives that had come and gone, the stories that had unfolded in these very streets. As she walked deeper into the district, she didn't notice the danger ahead. A building, one that had been under renovation for weeks, had a wall that was starting to crack. The work crew had left early that morning, and no one had noticed that a small section of the wall was unstable. A gust of wind, strong and unexpected, caused the structure to shift. The wall, weakened by the old mortar and the force of the wind, began to crumble. Without warning, a large piece of the wall broke loose and started to fall. The woman was too close to react in time. The debris came crashing down, and she was caught in the middle of it. She screamed in shock, trying to dodge the falling pieces, but the weight of the wall was too much. And then, just as she thought it was all over, a hand reached out from behind her, a hand she hadn't seen before. With incredible speed, the homeless man appeared out of nowhere, shoving her out of the way and pulling her to safety. She stumbled, confused and in shock, as the wall collapsed behind them. The sound of the crash echoed through the street, but the woman was safe. The homeless man had taken the full force of the falling debris, though, and he was hurt. He had a few cuts on his arms and face, and his clothes were torn. But he was alive, and so was she. The woman looked at him wide-eyed. She had no idea who he was or where he had come from, but there was no denying what had just happened. He had saved her life. She could hardly believe it. In that moment, the difference in their lives, the difference in their worlds, didn't seem to matter. There was only the feeling of being alive, of being given a second chance. The homeless man, though, seemed to brush it off as nothing special. He didn't ask for anything in return. He simply gave her a small nod as if to say, it was nothing. And then, without another word, he turned and began to walk away. The woman watched him for a moment, unsure of what to do or say. But as he walked off, she felt a sense of gratitude well up inside her. She had been saved by someone she had never even noticed before. A man who had nothing, yet had given her everything in that single moment. She couldn't let it go. There was no way she could walk away without at least offering something, some token of appreciation, but she didn't know how to reach him. He was already gone, swallowed by the quiet streets of the town. She stood there for a moment longer, still in shock, trying to process what had just happened. The sound of sirens began to fill the air, and soon, the police and fire department arrived to inspect the damage. But the woman wasn't thinking about the wall anymore. She was thinking about the man, the hero she had never seen before. And she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was only the beginning of something much bigger, something that would change both of their lives forever. The crash of the wall still echoed in her mind as the woman stood there, staring at the rubble. The emergency services had arrived and the area was being cleared, but her thoughts kept returning to the man who had saved her. She didn't even know his name, yet his face was burned into her memory. The way he had acted without hesitation, risking his own life for hers, left her in awe. She had never expected such a thing. It wasn't the sort of thing that happened to people like her. As the police and firefighters worked, the woman found herself lost in thought. She had lived a life of luxury, surrounded by wealth and comfort. Yet in that single moment she realized how disconnected she had become from the world around her. She had never really seen the people in her town, the ones struggling, the ones living on the edge. She had never stopped to consider that someone like the man who had saved her could have something valuable to offer, even if he didn't look like it. The paramedics took a look at the homeless man, quickly assessing his injuries. He had cuts on his arms and face, some of them bleeding, but nothing that looked too serious. He was tough, probably used to this kind of life. He seemed uncomfortable being the center of attention, though, and as soon as they finished checking on him, he began to walk away. The woman didn't want to let him slip away without at least thanking him properly. She wasn't sure why, but she felt a sense of responsibility. After all, he had just saved her life. She walked up to him, her heart pounding. "Wait!" she called out. He stopped but didn't turn around. He was still facing away from her, his back hunched, almost as if he was trying to disappear. She caught up to him and gently touched his arm. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaky with emotion. "You saved my life. I don't even know how to thank you." The man turned to face her, his expression unreadable. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at her with those tired eyes. Then, after a long moment, he spoke. "It was nothing," he said quietly, his voice rough. "Just doing what I could." The woman was taken aback by how humble he was. She had expected him to say something more, maybe ask for money or some kind of reward. But he didn't. Instead, he simply turned and began walking away again as if nothing had happened. She stood there for a few moments, watching him leave. She couldn't just let him go. There had to be more she could do. She had so much and he had so little. It felt wrong to just let him walk off without offering something. Before she knew it, she found herself walking after him. He was moving slowly, dragging his feet like he didn't have anywhere to go. She could see the weariness in his posture, the exhaustion that came from living a life full of hardship. "Wait," she called again, this time more insistently. The man didn't stop at first, but then he finally turned and looked at her over his shoulder. "What?" he asked, his tone neutral but not unkind. The woman hesitated, unsure of how to begin. I want to help you," she said. "You saved my life, and I feel like I should do something in return. I can give you money, or I can help you find a place to stay. Anything you need." The man's eyes softened for a moment, but then he quickly shook his head. "I don't need your charity," he said, his voice firm but not harsh. "I'm fine." "I don't think you understand," she said, stepping closer. "I'm not offering charity. I want to help. You don't have to accept, but at least let me help in some way. You deserve something for what you did." For a long moment, the man didn't respond. He just stood there, staring at her as if he was trying to figure out what to make of her offer. Finally, he spoke again. "You don't know anything about me," he said softly, almost to himself. I don't need anything from anyone. I don't want anything. But you deserve it, she insisted. You deserve something good for once. He let out a small sigh, rubbing his face with one hand. I don't need your pity, he said quietly. I'm not a charity case. The woman's heart ached at the pain in his voice. She hadn't meant to offend him. She wasn't offering pity, but genuine help. I don't think you understand, she said softly, trying to get him to listen. I'm not trying to fix you or make you feel bad. I just want to make sure you're okay. No one should have to live like this. The man's face softened for a moment, and he looked down at the ground as if searching for the right words. I've made my choices, he said slowly. This is my life now. I'm just trying to survive. I know, she said quietly, but maybe there's more to life than just surviving. He didn't respond, but he didn't walk away either. Instead, he stood there, as if unsure what to do with her offer. After a long pause, the woman took a deep breath and spoke again. I'll be here tomorrow at the cafe down the street. If you change your mind, if you ever want to talk, I'll be there. Without waiting for a response, she turned and began to walk back to the cafe. She felt strange leaving things unresolved, but she knew she couldn't force him to accept her help. It had to be his choice. As she walked back down the street, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just witnessed something profound. She had always seen the homeless as invisible, people she passed by without giving a second thought. But now she realized that they were people too, with stories and struggles and worth, and the man who had saved her was living proof of that. The next day she returned to the cafe. She didn't expect him to show up. After all, she had only met him the day before, and it wasn't like he owed her anything. But part of her couldn't help but hope that he might come, even if it was just to talk. As she sat down with her coffee, she noticed a shadow fall across her table. She looked up, and to her surprise, there he was, the homeless man standing hesitantly in front of her. He looked a little different today. His clothes were still worn, but there was a glimmer of something in his eyes, a spark that hadn't been there the day before. He seemed uncertain, as if he wasn't sure why he was there or what he was supposed to say. Hi, she said gently, smiling up at him. I'm glad you came. The man shifted his weight from one foot to the other, still unsure. I don't know why I'm here, he said softly. But I thought maybe I should hear what you have to say. And just like that, the door had opened. The beginning of a strange and unexpected friendship had started, one that neither of them had seen coming. But it was just the beginning, and there was a long road ahead of them. The following days passed quietly, but something had changed. The woman couldn't stop thinking about the homeless man. Every time she passed by the cafe where they had met, she wondered if he would show up again. She hadn't expected him to come back that morning, but part of her had hoped he would. And now that he had, she realized that maybe, just maybe, something was beginning to shift in both of them. The homeless man, who she still hadn't learned much about, had become a mystery to her. His life was a world apart from hers, a world she had never understood. But in the brief time they had spent together, she had come to realize that there was more to him than just the worn clothes and rough exterior. There was kindness, courage, and a quiet strength that she couldn't ignore. The woman decided that she wouldn't give up on helping him, even if he didn't want it. She knew it wasn't just about charity. It was about giving him a chance, a moment of hope that he could change his circumstances, or at least find something better than the life he had been living. The homeless man showed up at the cafe the next day, just like he said he would. She had noticed that he seemed a little more at ease around her, a little more open. He still didn't say much, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of curiosity perhaps, or maybe a hint of trust. He wasn't as guarded as he had been the first time they met. Good to see you again, she said as he approached the table. He gave a small, shy smile, but didn't sit down right away. I didn't expect you to be here. I come here every morning, she said, smiling. It's part of my routine. I've been coming here for years. He nodded as if thinking about what she said. I don't have much of a routine, he admitted. Just waking up, finding food, and getting through the day. She noticed the way his voice dropped when he spoke about his daily life. There was no bitterness, just a kind of resigned acceptance, as though he had made peace with the way things were. But there was also something more in his words, something that hinted at the possibility that he hadn't always felt this way. Maybe he used to dream of a different life, one that didn't feel like it was built on survival alone. Do you ever think about what you want to do? She asked gently. not sure how to approach the topic. He paused, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. "I used to," he said quietly, "but it feels like too much now. Like it's too late." She shook her head. "It's never too late." There was a long silence between them. He looked down at his hands, his fingers twitching slightly as if he didn't quite know what to do with them. The woman took a sip of her coffee, giving him time to think. "I used to have a family," he said suddenly, his voice rough. "I had a job, a life, but it all fell apart." She waited for him to continue, but he didn't. Instead, he seemed lost in the memory, his gaze distant. She could see the sadness in his eyes, and she knew there was so much more to his story than he had let on. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to," she said gently, "but I'm here if you ever want to talk." He nodded, though he didn't say anything more about his past. Instead, he changed the subject. "Why do you care?" he asked, his tone cautious. "You don't know me. I'm just a guy who's been on the street for too long. Why would you want to help?" She smiled softly, meeting his eyes. "Because everyone deserves a chance. And because I think you've got more to offer than you realize." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. For a moment she thought he might leave, but then he sat down across from her, as though he was giving this conversation a chance. They sat together in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their thoughts. For the woman, this was a rare moment of peace. She had spent so much time in her own world, wrapped up in her work and her success, that she had never truly connected with someone outside of her circle. But now with this man she felt something different. There was a connection here, a shared humanity that went beyond social status, beyond wealth, beyond all the things that usually kept people apart. Finally, the homeless man spoke again, his voice low. "I don't know what to do with myself," he admitted. "I don't know how to change things. It feels like it's too far gone." The woman leaned forward, her expression serious but kind. "It's not too far gone. You've already taken the first step just by talking to me." He looked at her, a little surprised by her response. "Talking doesn't fix anything." "No," she agreed, "but it's a start. Talking is where change begins. And you don't have to do it all at once. One small step at a time is enough." He looked down at his hands again, and for the first time the woman noticed that they were trembling slightly. She wasn't sure if it was from nervousness or the years of struggle that had worn him down, but she felt a deep empathy for him. "I don't know if I can do it," he said quietly. "I've been through so much and I've lost so much. I don't know if I can start over again." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a deep breath and spoke slowly. "Starting over doesn't mean erasing everything that came before. It means finding a way to move forward, no matter how small the steps are." The homeless man didn't respond at first. He just sat there as if weighing her words. He seemed to be wrestling with some inner conflict, torn between hope and doubt. She could see it in his eyes, the way they flickered between uncertainty and something deeper, something like a glimmer of possibility. "I'm not saying it's easy," she continued, her voice gentle, "but nothing worth doing is easy. And you're worth it. You're worth a chance." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know if I believe that, but I guess I'll think about it." That was all she needed to hear. She didn't expect him to change overnight. She didn't expect him to trust her fully just because she had offered him a seat at the table. But she knew that if she could get him to start thinking differently, even a little, then there was hope. Maybe not for everything to change immediately, but for something to change. For him to see that there was more to life than just survival. They sat there for a while longer, talking about small things. Nothing too deep, just getting to know each other. They talked about the weather, the town, and the little things that made life feel normal. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to keep the connection alive. Enough to give the homeless man a small sliver of hope. Eventually, he stood up to leave. But this time, something was different. He wasn't leaving because he felt like he had to. He was leaving because, for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had the possibility of a future that wasn't defined by the past but by the choices he could make moving forward. "Thanks," he said quietly as he stood up. "I'll think about what you said." She smiled at him, knowing that for now that was enough. "I'll be here when you're ready." He nodded and walked out of the cafe, disappearing into the street. The woman watched him go, a sense of hope swelling in her chest. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was just the beginning. The next few days were quiet. The woman kept coming to the cafe every morning, hoping to see the homeless man again, but he didn't show up. She hadn't expected him to return immediately, but a part of her had hoped that the small conversation they had shared would be enough to spark something inside him. But maybe it wasn't the right time. Maybe he needed more space. She didn't know. All she could do was wait and hope that eventually he would find his way back. One morning, about a week later, she was sitting at her usual table, sipping her coffee and reading a book. She wasn't expecting anything, but then she heard a familiar voice. "Mind if I join you?" She looked up, and there he was. The homeless man, standing at the edge of her table, looking uncertain but not as guarded as before. There was something different about him this time, a small change in his posture, a slight shift in the way he held himself. He wasn't slouched or looking down at the ground as he had before. This time he was standing a little taller with more confidence. "Of course," she said, smiling. "I'm glad you came back." He nodded and took a seat across from her. I've been thinking about what you said," he admitted, looking a little hesitant but determined. "I don't know if I'm ready for a big change yet, but I figured I'd start small." The woman smiled, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She hadn't expected him to jump into a complete transformation, but just hearing that he was willing to take the first step was enough. "That's all you need to do," she said gently. "Take it one step at a time. No pressure," he nodded, looking down at his hands. "I'm not sure what step to take, though," he said. "Everything feels so out of reach. I'm not sure where to even begin. Starting is always the hardest part," she said. "But you've already made it this far. You've already taken the hardest step, which is deciding to change." He thought about that for a moment, then looked up at her. "I guess that's true." The woman felt a small sense of victory in that moment. He was still unsure, but he was starting to believe that change was possible. That in itself was something. A spark of hope had been lit, and now all she needed to do was help him fan the flames. "I don't have a lot of money," he continued, his voice quiet, "but I was thinking maybe I could start by finding some work. Not something big, but just something. Maybe cleaning up around here or doing odd jobs for people." "That's a great idea," she said enthusiastically. "It's a start, and it doesn't matter how small the job is. What matters is that you're taking action." He smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him since they met. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her feel like they were on the right path. "Maybe I'll try," he said, still unsure but with a hint of excitement in his voice. "I've done some odd jobs in the past. Nothing fancy, but I know how to clean and fix things." She nodded. "You'd be surprised how many people need that kind of help. There are always small jobs to do, and if you ever need a reference, I'd be happy to vouch for you." He looked at her, surprised. "You would?" "Of course," she said. "You've proven you're dependable." "That's more than most people can say." He seemed taken aback by her kindness. "I never thought anyone would see me like that," he said quietly. She reached across the table, placing her hand on his for a moment. "You're not invisible. You matter." He looked down at their hands, then slowly withdrew his hand, rubbing his face. "I've been invisible for so long it's hard to believe I matter." "Believe it," she said. "You matter to me. And you'll matter to others too when you start showing them what you can do." They sat together for a while, talking about the small steps he could take toward finding work. They discussed cleaning jobs, gardening, and other small tasks that could help him get back on his feet. She could see the wheels turning in his head as he began to think about the possibility of work. It wasn't a huge change, but it was a start. The following days were a blur of small victories. The homeless man, whom she now knew was called Thomas, had started picking up small jobs around the town. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give him a sense of purpose. He cleaned windows for a local shopkeeper, helped a neighbor with yard work, and even started fixing broken fences in the town. Every time he finished a job, he seemed to stand a little taller, as if the weight of his past was slowly lifting. The woman watched from the sidelines, quietly proud of his progress. She could see the difference in him, how his confidence was growing with each small success. He wasn't the same man who had walked into the cafe weeks ago, unsure of himself and hiding behind his past. Now he was standing on his own 2 feet, taking pride in his work and slowly starting to see a future for himself. But change wasn't always easy. There were moments when Thomas would falter, when doubt crept in and made him question everything. On those days he would disappear for a while, not showing up at the cafe. The woman didn't push him.
She knew that he needed time.
He wasn't ready to face everything all at once, and that was okay. She was patient. She knew that real change took time, and she was willing to give him the space he needed. Then, one afternoon, Thomas came to the cafe, looking more tired than usual. He sat down across from her, his shoulders slumped. "I'm not sure this is working," he said quietly, looking down at his hands. "I've been trying, but it feels like no matter what I do, it's never enough." The woman looked at him with compassion, seeing the struggle in his eyes. "It's okay to feel that way," she said gently. "Change is hard, but it doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're trying. And that's all that matters." He shook his head. "I don't know if I can keep going. What if I'm just not meant to have a better life?" "You are," she said firmly. "You are meant to have a better life. But it's not going to happen overnight. You have to keep going, even when it feels impossible. That's how change happens." He didn't say anything for a long time, but she could see the struggle in his eyes. He was fighting against everything that had happened to him, fighting against years of pain and disappointment. But there was still something inside him that was willing to fight, even if it was just a small spark. Finally, he looked up at her. "I'll keep going," he said quietly. "For now, that's enough." She smiled at him, feeling a warmth in her chest. That's all anyone can do. Keep going, one step at a time. The weeks that followed were full of change, slow but steady. Thomas was becoming a different man, or perhaps he was finally allowing the man he had once been to resurface. Every morning, the woman met him at the cafe, and each time she saw him, she noticed something new. His posture was better. His smile, though still small, came more often. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living little by little, day by day. There were still difficult moments, days when doubt crept in, and the weight of his past seemed too heavy to carry. On those days, Thomas would withdraw, disappearing for a while. But each time he would return, a little stronger, a little more certain that he could make it through. The woman watched him grow, feeling a sense of pride and hope. She had always believed in the power of second chances, and now she could see how much it could truly change a life. What had started as an act of kindness had become something much more, something neither of them had expected. A connection, a friendship, and a partnership in the truest sense of the word. One day, Thomas came to the cafe looking more confident than ever. He had taken on a few regular jobs around town, cleaning for an elderly woman, helping the local shopkeeper with deliveries, and it was clear that he had built a reputation for being reliable and hardworking. "You look different," the woman said with a smile as he sat down. "More like yourself, maybe?" He grinned, though it was a little shy. "I guess I'm starting to feel like myself again." "I'm glad to hear that," she said, her heart swelling with happiness for him. "I can see it. You're doing great." "I'm trying," Thomas said, his voice still a little unsure, but the confidence was there, hidden beneath the words. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about taking it one step at a time. It's still not easy, but I think I'm getting there." "I never said it would be easy," she replied, her tone gentle. "But look at what you've accomplished. You've already changed so much." Thomas nodded slowly, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. "You know, I never really believed anyone could help me. I thought I was too far gone. But you've been there. You didn't just help me get by. You showed me that I could have more than just surviving. I could actually live." She smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "You've always had it in you, Thomas. You just needed someone to remind you of that." For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of their conversation sinking in. Thomas had come so far, but there was still so much more ahead of him. The journey wasn't over, but it had become something different now. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about building a future, about believing that a better life was possible. "So what's next for you?" she asked, breaking the silence. He looked thoughtful for a moment. "I've been thinking about that. I don't want to go back to what I was before, but I don't know what the future holds. Do you have any ideas?" she asked gently. Thomas shrugged, looking out the window. I think I want to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm starting to feel like I'm part of this town now. Like I have something to contribute. I want to keep working, keep helping. I want to find something bigger than just scraping by." The woman nodded, proud of his realization. "That sounds like a great plan. You've already shown everyone what you can do, and you don't have to do it alone, you know." "I know," he said with a small smile. "I don't know what I would have done without you." You've done it yourself, she replied. I've just been here, watching you make the changes you needed to make. Thomas looked at her, his eyes full of sincerity. I don't think I would have made it without you. Not just because you helped me find work or gave me a place to talk, but because you believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. That's something I'll never forget. She smiled softly, her eyes shining. You're the one who did the hard work. I just gave you a little nudge when you needed it. He shook his head. It was more than a nudge. They sat together, the cafe bustling around them, but they were lost in their own world. For Thomas, it was a world he was beginning to feel a part of again. He wasn't the man he had been just months ago. The man who felt invisible. The man who had given up. Now he was a man who had found his place, his purpose, even if he wasn't quite sure where it would take him yet. A few days later, something unexpected happened. The woman's phone rang early in the morning, and when she answered, it was a familiar voice on the other end. Hello? Is this the woman who helped that guy? The homeless one? She paused, unsure of where this was going. I'm sorry, who is this? This is Greg from the hardware store, the man said. I've been hearing a lot about that guy, Thomas, about how he's been helping around town. I just wanted to let you know that we've got a full-time position open at the store. I don't know if he'd be interested, but I thought I'd reach out. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this, but it felt like the perfect next step for Thomas. That's incredible, she said, her voice full of excitement. I'll tell him right away. Thank you for calling. After she hung up, she grabbed her coat and rushed to the cafe, eager to tell Thomas the good news. When she arrived, she found him sitting at their usual table, looking out the window. Thomas, she called out, excitement bubbling in her voice. He looked up at her, a smile creeping onto his face as he saw her excitement. What's going on? I have amazing news, she said, sitting down next to him. The hardware store just called. They've got a full-time job opening, and they want you to apply. His eyes widened in surprise, and then, for the first time in a long while, a real, bright smile spread across his face. Are you serious? He asked, barely able to believe it. Absolutely, she replied, nodding. They've been hearing about all the work you've been doing, and they want to offer you a position. You've earned it, Thomas. For a moment he was silent, processing what she had just told him, and then slowly he shook his head, a look of awe crossing his face. I never thought I'd hear those words, he said softly. A job. A real job. You've worked hard for this, she said, her voice gentle. You deserve it. He looked at her, his eyes shining with emotion. Thank you. I don't know how to say it, but thank you for everything, for believing in me, for showing me that I could have more than just another day of survival. I never stopped believing in you, she said with a smile, and I'm so proud of how far you've come. Thomas sat back in his chair, his face lit up with something that had been missing for a long time. Hope. The future was still uncertain, but now it was filled with possibility. And just like that, the story of the homeless man who saved a woman from a falling wall had come full circle. It was no longer just a story of survival. It was a story of transformation, of second chances, and of the power of human connection. It was a story of two people who had changed each other's lives, not through grand gestures, but through small, steady steps towards something better. And for Thomas, it was just the beginning.